Well, my question to all of you is, how will your company respond in a crisis? Are you prepared? Well, let's take a look at an actual 911 call to a manufacturing company that's in the midst of an incident. This picture was taken from the highway which was nearby to the plant. You can see the fire in the background. There was also a city nearby, and 911 was getting calls from people surrounding the plant. What follows is a transcript that I've listened to personally from this incident. What strikes me is that the phone rings 7 times before it's answered. And the guard at the main gate picks up the phone, and Metro 911 says, "Hey, this is Metro 911. What do we have? Do you know?" And Steve at the main gate says, well, I haven't got instructions as to what to tell everybody yet. And Metro comes back and says, "I've got County Emergency Services Director trying to find something out. Do you know what area of the plant or anything?" You can hear the urgency in 911 in the voice of the operator. And then the frustration when the main gate guard, Steve, replies, "Well, I can't give out any information. Like I say, we'll contact you with the proper information." When the phone rings, how will your company respond? Well, I haven't got instructions, or with a well-thought-out, practiced response? See, this was a burning question for me. I was the Global Vice President for Environmental Health and Safety at a chemical company, and I was one of the first contacted about any major incident. And we had a global network of 150 manufacturing sites. Now, earlier in my career, I was a plant manager at a chemical plant in Houston, Texas. So I've seen a major incident unfold from both sides, from being at the scene at a plant and from being in the corporate office, sometimes 1,000 miles away. I think we all know that the possibility of being confronted with a crisis that involves serious risk to your manufacturing business is very real. So if you're in environmental health and safety or operations or communications, you want to make sure your crisis plan is rock solid. Or if you're in a business role, you want to make sure your business can recover quickly from a crisis. And if you're an executive, you're concerned about minimizing any reputational damage that might come from an incident. Well, the purpose of a corporate crisis plan is to be able to respond in a timely manner with the right people and the right resources. Now, what do I mean by a corporate crisis plan? Well, this is when both the corporate team and the site team are involved with a major incident. Corporate does not take over the incident. The incident command structure is really at the scene of the incident. They must be the ones in the control. They're there and present. But corporate provides support to that incident site team. So the plan has to be specific enough to give directions for immediate action, but yet flexible to allow for whatever the situation is at the scene. And it's going to be molded to your company's culture and your company's particular hazards. But the overall objective is the same. You want to be able to respond instinctively and automatically. As soon as you get a call that there's an incident, you want your team members to be playing out in their minds exactly what their responsibilities are so that they can get right into the recovery for the incident. It's like when I go to a hotel, I look at that hotel door, the room door for me, and I look to see where are the exits so that I have a plan in case there was a fire sometime during the evening. I'd already know where to go. And that's the same thing with a corporate plan. You want it to be instinctive and automatic. So my question is for you to rate your corporate crisis plan. To make this next 20 to 30 minutes worthwhile, I suggest you get out a pen and piece of paper and rate your plan as we go along. Rate the priority your company places in a corporate crisis plan. And then look at these 6 basic steps we'll cover. Where are your strengths and where are your gaps? That way, at the end of the session, you'll have the start of an action plan to make sure your company is prepared. So we'll focus on these 3 points. When is the corporate crisis plan needed? What are the 6 basic elements of the plan? And is your company prepared? At the end of the session, I'm going to direct you to our website where you can pick up a white paper that will go into more depth and help you along with looking at your corporate crisis plan. So let's start out with asking, when is a corporate crisis plan needed? You've all seen pyramids like this, where the frequency of an incident is indirectly related to the seriousness of the incident. So it's not uncommon where people may think that this isn't going to happen to my company, because indeed major incidents are infrequent, but they can be devastating in human terms, with fatalities, and in dollar terms with impact to the community and the corporation. So when is a corporate crisis plan needed? Well, typically sites can handle lower level incidents within their unit by an incident commander or within their site by an emergency response team at the site. But when it starts to go outside the boundaries of a manufacturing site, impacting the community and the corporation, the resources at the site can get overwhelmed, and that's when you need a corporate crisis plan. Now, there's a bonus to having a well-thought-out, practiced corporate crisis plan, and that is you can use it if you need it at level 1 and level 2. That makes for good practice. It builds relationships between the site and corporate, and it's a way to respond even to these lower-level incidents. So a best practice I've seen where people have used parts of the corporate crisis plan on more of a routine basis is taking a look at the notification process. One company that I've worked with, they report all of their incidents through that corporate crisis line. So when a major incident occurs, they don't have to think. It's instinctive, it's automatic. They pick up the phone and make the call. The side benefit to using this part of the corporate process is corporate then has an overall list of incidents that they can track and trend and work on preventative measures when they see something repeating itself over and over. Well, let's check in now. With your pen and paper handy, how would you rate your company on having a priority for a corporate crisis plan? Now, many times, people in operations, communications, environmental health and safety, you usually have their support. They usually see that priority because they're the folks on the front line. Executive leadership, how do they stack up when it comes to priority? Let me share with you, when I was vice president, I worked directly with our board of directors on environmental health and safety matters. And when we had that incident in the U.S. right off the Gulf Coast, where an oil rig had a leak, and we could watch it on the news every day, oil spilling into the ocean, I know our board of directors wanted to make sure that we were well equipped and ready in case of any type of major incident. So if you have a gap on this part of your corporate crisis plan where you don't see that priority, look for a major incident that's happened somewhere else and bring that to the attention of your leadership and use it as a case study. There certainly is a business case for having a corporate crisis plan. Now, you can't claim that it will prevent an incident, but a corporate crisis plan is there to mitigate the impact. It's like insurance. You hope you never have to use it, but if you do, you want to be prepared. The International Federation of the Red Cross in April of 2013 came out with an estimate that for every dollar spent on disaster preparedness, An average of $4 is saved on response and recovery. So that for every dollar spent, $4 is saved on the response and recovery in terms of injuries, business continuity, getting back quicker, avoiding fines and penalties, avoiding or reducing the amount of government agency scrutiny, and certainly minimizing that reputational damage. Again, the purpose of having this corporate crisis plan is that you're able to have effective communication with management, business groups, internal and external stakeholders, that you're already ahead of the game in thinking through decisions, making effective use of resources at the company, and enabling compliance with government requirements. In other words, a corporate crisis plan enables you to respond in a timely manner with the right people and the right resources. So get your pen and paper ready. We're going to go through each of these 6 elements listed here so you can determine your strengths and your gaps and get a head start on an action plan. Well, the first element is to have an overall process determined. This overall process should describe when, why, and how corporate management responds. I've listed a couple of typical components that you would want in your overall process. And you certainly want to have incident criteria so everybody is clear as to when you would pull corporate into a response for an incident. It's also very helpful to have pre-approved practices and policies. Which contractors are you going to be able to call in immediately to help with this major incident? Already have funds set aside or approved for response efforts. Your HR team have practices so that they can come right in and support employees. If you recall, I mentioned a company that had used the corporate notification process for all incidents. Well, I want to follow up and tell you how they used incident criteria to very clearly earmark which incidents required corporate response. It was a simple matrix. At the top of the matrix were types of incidents: injury, fire, spill, security, and so on. And then underneath that top row, they listed out what was a level 1 incident. Typically incidents that would, again, be within the plant walls, lower level injury, and they described level 1 in terms of impact. Then they described level 2 in terms of impact. And finally, they described level 3. And those level 3 incidents were the ones that corporate would come and respond, and the teams would start to mesh together. Everyone had this matrix. It was very clear. It was a common understanding. And it actually evolved over time as people actually tweaked it for different incidents that occurred. So, element number 1, a process. When, why, and how corporate management responds. Mark how you feel you rate on this one. On a scale of 1 to 5, do you have a process? Is it documented and up to date? Well, let's move to element number 2, and that's notification. This is a process to quickly and efficiently notify and assemble that corporate team. And here's the challenge. You should be able to do that within 5 minutes. So when that call comes into the corporate office, within 5 minutes, the team leader should be on the incident, ready to go. They have to make this simple. The site should only have to make 1 call because they are totally focused on the incident that's unfolding. That site should make 1 call, and then it should go into some type of notification flow chart that you've already described so that somebody is triaging that call and reaching out to the right people. You should have notification technology. In today's world, there's many systems out there available that reach out and communicate with designated people. And finally, you need a system for 24 staffing. Who's on call? Who's going to be available so that you can meet that 5-minute mark? These are just typical components that you should consider in your notification process. Now, I'll share again, in my time as vice president, I was able to see the change in communication technology, and we had to be on top of that. At one point, we were using voicemail to reach out to people. Well, of course, voicemail is a thing of the past. Email is even not used as frequently now as text messaging. So knowing the people on your team and agreeing ahead of time on a communication technology is very important, and that changes over time. So rate your own company. Do you have a process to quickly and efficiently notify and assemble the corporate team? On a scale of 1 to 5, can you meet that 5-minute notification from when the call comes into corporate to when your team leader is ready to go? Well, let's move to element 3, the crisis management structure. So this is the who. Who's on your team roster? I've listed again some typical functions that you might want represented, but of course this is molded to your company's organization and the type of incidents that you encounter. What's important is to have role definitions. Here's an example for a team leader's role definition. Now, I'll share with you again what I've experienced working with other companies, is not only do the people on the team need to know their roles, but those people outside the team need to respect and know those roles. Many people you find in leadership, and I include myself, are those type A personalities. And so when there's an incident, when there's something going on, we want to be in charge. But that can't happen. And having a corporate crisis plan laid out, role definitions well known, the people who do not need to be involved are off the picture, and the people who are in charge realize it and go forward. So how do you rank when you look at your crisis management structure? Do you have just an informal team, or have you assigned teams? And those assigned teams, do they have clear role definitions? Rate yourself on this aspect, 1 to 5. Well, now you need a place for people to go. And that's element 4, the command center. Where does the corporate crisis team gather to work? Well, you need an equipped physical command center, but you also need to be equipped for virtual. You need to be able to reach out to your experts wherever they are across your company. You need to be able to certainly reach out to the site that's involved. I listed also some typical equipment needs, and that's what would have in your corporate crisis plan. You'd have this all thought out and then have your command center equipped. Now, we all know you can have it equipped day 1, and then a week later, things may be missing or not working. So it's important to have it equipped and checked routinely. And this evolves as well. I know one of the groups we worked with, they found a need to have a go bag ready. And the go bag was a bag that was already packed, and if somebody needed to be sent out immediately to the site, they could grab that bag and go. So all of this really starts to evolve. But where do you rate yourself now? Do you have a command center? Is it fully equipped? And do you have what you need to make it virtual? Rate yourself on a 1 to 5 scale. Well, this next element is the most important, and that's training and drills. And as you look at training and drills, I would suggest, based on what we found working with companies, is that you actually design it to assess the level of understanding of participants. So it's not meant as a gotcha exercise, but it's also not meant that everything should go perfectly. You should be looking for where things are not working. And at bullet point here says start simple. Start simple. See where you're at, and then evolve in complexity. And certainly use external participation. Again, that gives you the chance to build that relationship with your external stakeholders before you have the major incident. So the goal here is to get people to that stage of being instinctive and automatic. Now, I have found that you need to really look out far in your organization. If there's some place that's kind of remote, well, that's probably a good place to make sure you're doing some training and drills. Another idea is to look at your top risks across the company. Do you have sites by a waterway? That would be a site to make sure you do drills. How about sensitive communities, like sites near hospitals or schools? Or look at the hazard level. Where are the sites that have the highest hazard? Those are the places to make sure you're doing drills. And I would add again, from my experience working with the board, involve your board and your executives. They also want to feel that they will be ready in case of a major incident. And it also adds priority when you're doing your drills. If people know the executive or even the board of directors are going to participate in some way, you automatically get people's attention. Well, let's rate your company on training and drills. On a scale of 1 to 5, how do you rate? And finally, we'll move to element 6, and that's resources. And this is an element that you're probably never finished. You can always add resources. What are the databases you need, the contact lists, the procedures, the templates? Have you got data for all of your sites accessible at the corporate headquarters? Now, this is difficult, isn't it? Because things change. Equipment changes. People change. How do you keep on top of this? Well, the best practices that I've seen is people who put this and embed it right in their environmental health and safety management system. I know many of us do ISO 14000, OHSAS 18000, responsible care, and that's a built-in management system where you have internal checks and balances to always make sure that things are up to date. And these resources are important to keep up to date. And how do you rank on a scale of 1 to 5? Are they current and readily available and accessible? That's the question. Or do you have a gap in this area? Well, we've looked at all 6 basic elements. This describes what you need to respond in a timely manner with the right people and the right resources. I hope you've had a chance to rate yourself on each of these areas as we've talked. What kind of priority do you give to that corporate plan? Where are your strengths on these 6 elements? Where are your gaps? And then you can give yourself a grade of overall, how prepared are you? And I mentioned up front, and here's the website, crisisplanconsultants.com. Right on the home page, you can click and get this PDF. No email required. This is strictly for your benefit and education. And it's a white paper that was put together by a number of companies sharing their best practices. We talk about a corporate crisis plan being like insurance. You don't want to have to use it, but if you do, it's there to reduce the impact of an incident. And just to remind us that there are very real impacts, I want to follow up with that manufacturing site that we talked about up front, the one that received that 911 call. Well, that impact was devastating. In human terms, there were 2 fatalities. The response people that were treated for exposure, firefighters and contractors. 40,000 residents in that nearby city had to be sheltered in place. And the interstate where that picture was taken was closed for several hours. There was off-site damage to homes and to businesses, and that company got cited for violations and fined in the $100,000 range. And they got scrutiny from the government. The U.S. Chemical Safety Board did an investigation and found major deficiencies in their response planning and communication. But in addition, their reputation was damaged, and even the right to operate. Look at this quote from one of the community members at a public meeting. Finally, after the explosion, and the tragedy of Ares showed that the employees were not properly trained to handle an emergency of this magnitude, how could regulators allow a company to even operate, to even hold a permit? Having a plan gives you a chance to reduce this impact, gives you a chance to respond. So my question, when the phone rings, how will your company respond?